what I would like to talk today a little bit about and also get your feedback is the relation between CSR and social innovation. Again, that book is about social innovation. It's not me written, it's a contributed version, which means it has the input of about 35 professors, a lot of them practitioners, about how they see social innovation. So it was also a tool for us to learn about how we drive social innovation at Intel. I will give you some examples, how we do a bit about Intel, how we put that in place, and so on. So in terms of format, I think we're here at a school, and by the way, it's the first time I think I'm talking to a very dedicated CSR study group or so. Usually it's other MBAs, because the topic of CSR very often is not focused in one kind of study or so. It's a little bit dispersed among others, so I'm very happy to be here for the first time. Just as that. Okay, we're in class, just please raise your hand, right? Don't send me an app or a SMS or so. It's a typical joke from the IT industry these days. But in terms of format, what I would say, it doesn't have to be that I'm talking and then Q&As, we can do that as well, but also interrupt me anytime, ask me questions or so. Don't be shy on that one and saying, you see it differently or you agree or whatever. We can make that really very interactive if you want. That's okay. I have a lot of slides. I don't have to show them all. So we can go through. The first two lines are basically the only thing I would like you to remember when you leave today. I should have done that in a different color, but okay, that was too late then. There's one thing. The key message really is, on one side, you have what is CSR, and I will talk about that. Corporate responsibility, corporate social responsibility. That's one thing. We talk about that. There's a couple of different concepts and so on. The second thing then is there's something new, which we call social innovation. There's lots of other terms, but let's not be too kind of focused on these words here. Lots of people today would call it social innovation. So I'm making a distinction between CSR on one side and then somehow moving to social innovation. And these are two different things for me, even though they are, of course, interrelated. But we see that really as not the next big thing, but really something new in addition. That's the only thing, and that's basically we will spend the next 90 minutes on, talking about what is the relation between these two. But that's really the only thing that I see. Both are important, both are there, but these two things are important. I will then talk a little bit also about maybe challenges for social innovation and implementation aspects if we have time, but mainly talking about these two concepts. You don't need to read that. This is a typical thing, but that's why I wanted to show it to you, about how do people, how do companies, organizations structure their CSR activities. You can see it here, maybe very small in red, difficult to read a little bit, ESG, environmental, social, governance factors. Right? That's what you typically have in terms of reporting, how you report your CSR activities, how you structure your CSR activities in these ESG. You have a lot of environmental factors that you report on. You have social factors, people, supply chain, contributions to society. And you have governance factors, how you run your own business. Now, this is all very complicated and really doesn't help the picture. We have a simple translation. This is our translation of the previous chart, basically. How do we do that? And I use that example here for Intel to show how we do it, but a lot of other companies do it in a very similar way. And you will see later why I'm expanding on that. So the CSR approach for us, if you look at this environmental social governance structure, has three major pillars at a worldwide level. And there are local differences. Israel does it a little bit different than Europe and a little bit different than South America, of course. But overall, this is how we structure our CSR activities. Care for the people of the planet and inspiring the next generation. So these three pillars are the key cornerstones of our CSR activities. And then care for the people, what does it encompass? I just learned that in Israel, 89% of the companies are allowing their people, for example, in terms of volunteering, to do volunteering in their work time, which I think is one of the highest ones in the world. I haven't seen that anywhere else. So on one side, I could say we are doing great here at Intel because we are really proud of very high numbers. But then again, I'm in a country now where it really has a very long tradition to do volunteer and community work. So I think that's really something we also do, etc. And Revital can explore more on that if you need more details. And there we do volunteering. We try to make it a great place to work. I think including Israel and a lot of countries, we're trying to be the employer of choice. We work on safety, of course, and these kind of things. So it's really like, how do we take care of our people in various areas? We are pretty good at that, I think. We still have challenges in this discussion about how many female employees do we have, which is a long story there, of course, because we are in a technical company, and the problem is that a lot of students or so are, unfortunately, in various parts of this world are male. So, I mean, that's what is also represented in that. So, but in the end, these are all these people programs. Care of the planet is interesting. If you look at that, there's 3 areas that we work on in the environmental space. One is, of course, sustainable management. And that means, how do we make sure that our own operations are run in a very sustainable way? We have a big fab here in Kiryat Gat, down in the south, in Israel. There's constant work, of course. How do we manage it? How do we reduce the water usage? How do we lower the emissions that we have from the fabs? How do we reduce the energy that we have? For example, in the US, we only use 100% renewable energy. And I think we're the largest, or second largest, I think largest purchaser of green, so-called green energy in the US or so. These kind of things. It's basically, how do we manage our own operations, right? Big thing. The other one, energy efficient products. That's also very interesting, of course, because these are the chips. This is the power consumption of the chips that we have. And apart from the display of all these Asus, Apples, and whatever you have, the chip is one of the key drivers, of course, of the power consumption of computers. And if you look at that, you all have various devices, so you can imagine that reducing the power consumption of all of these devices by 10–20% will have a significant impact today. And of course, it helps you to save energy. But all of that, interestingly enough, if you look at this one here, and difficult to read, it says 2% and 98%. Guess what these 2% are, what is meant with that? Any ideas what these 2% might be in that respect?
The effect.
Sorry?
The effect that you got.
From IT. From IT, absolutely. The effect today is something like 2 to 3% of the global warming, so a negative impact, comes from IT. McKinsey, in the McKinsey 2020 report, estimates that might go up to 5 to 6%. So whatever, 2 to 5%, somewhere here. That is the negative effect of all IT, not Intel, all IT. And that's actually more than the airline industry today, who is often accused about, global warming and pollution and so on. So IT has a more negative impact on global warming than the airline industry today. We have to realize that. So when people talk about green IT, you have to put it in perspective, right? IT as such is not green, or you can say about green airlines. It's simply because, we all have at least 3 devices, I would say, maybe more, but you might not have 3 airplanes. Well, not everybody of you. Some. So the thing is, still, this is 2 to 5%. So that's why we work on this energy efficiency. But the big question, regardless, is then there's another 95% roughly. So what about the other 95%? And this is our key focus, actually, technologies for the environment. That's where we see also huge potential. Where can technology, where can IT help to overcome some of the challenges? Where can we help the societies, together with partners or so, to use technology in a way to reduce that, let's say, global footprint there? Just to give you this kind of a share here, so that's why this technology for the environment, some people call it green through IT. Again, we don't like these words, green through IT, but we rather call it technologies for the environment in general. So that's one of the key focus areas. And what you already see here, what we will hear me talking more and more is, compared to other CSR programs, you understand this part then, technologies for the environment, and even these 2 or 5% are much more than just what a CSR department or CSR managers or so can handle. It really starts already here to touch the rest of the organization. Because even we are a group of corporate affairs, public affairs, it's not something that we work on. We can work on that, of course, but in the end, if the other 95,000 people or 98,000 people of the company are not working on that, it's useless what we do. So you need to somehow already there start to engage the whole company instead of what you have today very often, a CSR department and the business, right? So it's really already here getting together, and you will hear me talking more about that. The third pillar, again, we could talk 2 hours, but I try to limit it to 1 slide here. Inspiring the next generation. This is also, again, where we think we have a responsibility. One is education transformation. This circle there, that's what we call the education transformation wheel. Wheel is nice because it encompasses everything. And there's a couple of things where we engage ourselves in education. And give you two examples here. It's professional development and assessment, maybe. Why do we do that? Well, I tell you first what we do and then why do we do that. In professional development, there's a lot of programs we have now in about 80 countries around the world where we work with ministries of education to develop training programs for teachers, not for pupils or students, for teachers, how to integrate technology in the classroom. Again, it's not how to use a PC, it's not how to use a computer or whatever. But the fact is, the teachers who are today in the 50s, when they did their diploma a couple of decades back, they did it on a typewriter. None of that existed there, right? Maybe the first teachers did it on a very old kind of PC. And these teachers there, who still have 10, 15 years of teaching in front of them, are now confronted standing in class, and all these students come there with all the tablets, the iPhones, whatever, and they suddenly have access to all of that within the classroom or outside of the classroom. And the question is now, how do teachers deal with all of that, right? And that leads to assessment as well. That leads to assessment. How do you assess what a pupil, what students do today? If you had asked 50 years ago, when was the whatever kind of war a couple of 100 years back, that gave you good credits if you knew that, right? Today it gets you 0 points because there's Wikipedia, and you just type it in and you have the answer. So there's no more, nothing that the student really needs to remember. So how do you deal with that? How do you change assessment? What is a good assessment in the 21st century? Right? These kind of things. And there we are working with a lot of partners and ministries of education, with the World Bank, UN, UNESCO, etc., some research project. How does assessment really look in today's technology environment? Why do we do all that? Why do we engage there? Very simple. We sell computer chips. The more computers we sell to schools, the better our balance sheet looks like. Very simple. That's our business. That's why we are here. We have education sales, of course. That's not a secret. So we try to sell to schools, as we try to sell to small businesses, large business, etc. However, we realize as well that this is a situation in schools that is somehow, as I mentioned before, to a certain degree, a real challenge for the schools to follow. So we work with the ministries of education together, making them understand what is today's technology, what is the future technology, and how it can be integrated into the classroom. We're not developing programs locally. There's no program manager in Santa Clara in California developing curricula for Israeli schools. Of course not. That is done locally, for example, right, with the teachers. But our role here is to say, okay, we are responsible of technology in the classroom, not alone, but among others, we are responsible. So a certain degree of responsibility we need to assume and say, how do we help them in this respect? And then we have this cypreneurship. It's a lot of entrepreneurship, science programs. As I said, science, and we talk about STEM, and STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. So all these technical areas. And there we try to foster new thinking. I mean, we have the Inter-Business Challenge, we have the ISEF. It's about the 1,500 of the brightest students in the world in this area who come to the US once a year from all over the world. I think half of the countries of this world. We have 70 countries, I think, who participate. 1,500 of students, 13 to 15 or 16-year-old pre-college. And I cannot give you the titles. You can Google them because there's not one single title, I think, of their research project I would even understand. Leave alone the project, but I don't even understand the title, right? I'm not a technician, so it is incredible what 15-year-olds can do today with technology in science. It is so amazing right now, and you see that. So we try to foster that, what kind of role technology can play there. So we had this people, environment, and inspiring the next generation, but then what happens now? What are the next steps? So we do that, and a lot of other companies do that to a certain degree. And we're good at that, but I'm not saying we're the only company. There's a lot of good companies by now because CSR is around for some years. You know that, you study it. So a lot of companies do similar things right now. But where do we move from here? One of the challenges here, and we know that, but there was a nice article in the American Marketing Journal there once, to buy or not to buy. It is, in the end, we have to realize by now, and actually even we as Intel somehow should say discovered that, or realized that, I would rather say, CSR is really not about why people buy. You can be great in everything that I said before, which is our CSR approach, again in a nutshell. We can be great at that, but that doesn't really get you how to buy. And I'm not saying Intel, because you cannot buy our products, so to speak, right? I mean, you cannot buy Intel chips. But even for other companies, it is not why people buy today. We have to realize that. CSR is only why people do not buy. And what it means, of course, is you might guess that, right? It's if you don't have it right, then it has a negative impact on your business. We have had these examples, Shell, BP, Exxon, whatever, other companies where there was a disaster, they didn't handle it properly. If something goes wrong in CSR, it has a negative impact on your business, on reputation, etc. If everything goes right, it does not so much have a positive impact on your business. And when I say we discussed that, it's, a couple of years ago, what is the business case of CSR? How do we get to the press with CSR? We were struggling with that. And mainly also here, Revital and I, we worked on that. How do we get to the press with our CSR activities? And we succeeded partially, but not really that we were happy. The reason now what we start to understand is there was nothing to succeed about. Because if you look at the words responsibility, it is the corporate responsibility or social or whatever you call it. But in the end, it's about responsibility. And the companies are responsible for what they do, for their operations, for the people that they hire, etc., to a certain degree. In the end, the same like you. I mean, most of you might not have kids, but you all have parents, right? And you are somehow responsible for your parents. And when you come to university or to the business on Monday morning, do you talk about that? That you changed the diapers of your kid, or that you brought your mother who cannot walk anymore somewhere to a whatever kind of nice entertainment? No, you don't talk about that. You feel responsible as a person. And the same responsibility do companies have. They're responsible for the people. They're responsible for the environment. But it doesn't mean that they have to talk about it or that they get credit when they talk about it. You don't get credit. Yeah, sure, you're a responsible person, so you do that. The same is true with the press. And sometimes why press didn't write about CSR? Everywhere we see that. Well, is this because press is stupid? No, press is not stupid. Then well, Thomas, yeah, press writes about bad things, not about good things. Yeah, okay, we hear that. But in the end, even that's not true. Press likes to write about new things, good or bad, but new things. And that is what CSR is not always providing, right? CSR is not always providing new things. Changing or making sure that our workers down in the factory in Kiryat Gat are safe every day, 24/7. Who writes about that? We constantly improve that. We make sure that there's enough safety things, etc. But to write about it, no. However, if something goes wrong, if the press can prove to us that we didn't do all the measures and there were, hopefully not, but 2 or 3 people dead, well, then we have a problem, right? So it's exactly that. CSR is why people don't buy. And so how far is CSR going in terms of responsibility? At least in Europe, partially elsewhere, but I'm always careful on that. At least in Europe, I would say, there starts to be a saying CSR is not innovative. You have to do it, but it's not innovative. It's partially reactive. Is it really the business? Does it have to, where's the link to the business here? It's partially suspicious because, we had that discussion very often. Is there greenwashing? I mean, you do something, a quick fix there. I mean, however you behave as a company, then you do quick fixes, something nice. You give a lot of money to children and elderly people and maybe to save some trees somewhere, and you think you're done. Well, that's dangerous, of course, and ruins the idea of CSR, right? Because it's nonsense in the end. And first of all, CSR also, I don't have that, but always think about it has to do with the core business right now. You have to, that's what we said in terms of technology. We are responsible for bringing technology. How can we solve that? And if I was at a summit recently where there were 2 banks, and these 2 banks, one brought about how they invest in environment in their city quarter and how do they save trees and clean rivers in the area where they live. And I have to say it's certainly good. I mean, it's better than nothing, right? But in the end, the role of banks, for me at least, should not be to save trees or clean rivers. It should be to make sure that, things like the last 5 years don't happen again. That's what they should work on, be it education in this financial sectors or so, but that's their main responsibility. Banks don't pollute rivers too much, with all respect. They do other things, and that's what they have to work on. So as we have to work on what technology impact has. So in the end, there's a lot of questions right now about CSR being not innovative, reactive, suspicious, maybe greenwashing, etc. And that's where we stand today, basically, right? Now, how do we move from there? Yeah, sure. You have a question?
Kind of a remark, maybe. You are talking about the new guidelines of the GRI, actually. So can we expect that your next report will be according to this fourth generation of GRI?
I think it goes beyond that, what we're saying. I mean, definitely we apply to that. We work with the GRI as well in one respect, but what I'm talking today is much more than what it is. I think GRI is a given, that's a standard, etc., that proves what companies should do.
If the fourth generation is talking about the core of the business, as you say, bank shouldn't deal with the rivers.
Well, they can do it, but I think if we really look at how companies behave responsible, I think the role of the bank should be to make sure to put systems in place that what we've seen the last 6 years doesn't happen again, right? Or at least make sure that they assume their responsibility as we make sure that whatever we might have seen in technology goes in the right direction, and food industry to make sure that the food is whatever healthy and natural or whatever you want. So that's a core competency that I'm talking about, and the greenwashing very often comes from the fact when companies engage in activities that are not really part of their core, because then you think they just throw money at that. However, if they work in areas, try to improve in the areas where they are responsible somehow for, there's much more credibility to that, also to overcome that trust issue.
Do you differentiate between the term of CSR and sustainability? Because some of these issues are getting answers by the term sustainability.
Oh, that's a good question. Yes, I do differentiate, but in the end, I don't have that slide here. I had that once, about 33 terms or so that you call it, right? Green, sustainable, sustainable entrepreneurship, corporate social responsibility, corporate responsibility, you have all that. Sustainability is much more for me. Sustainability, actually with social innovation, the way I see it goes more in that direction of creating the sustainable company. I know there's a debate, and also in last December we had a round table with universities. There were 2 professors who said sustainability should be in the green environment space. I would not agree to that, because sustainability in its pure sense means just the capacity to endure. You can have a sustainable company, and if we want to make Intel a sustainable company, it's very simply said, we want to make sure that Intel still exists in 20 years from now. That is what I call sustainability. I know the majority today, mainstream, when you hear sustainability means green to a lot of people, but we try to see it much more. Sustainable people development means investing in your people, right? Sustainable education, so there's various concepts of sustainability. So the responsibility is one thing, but making sure it's like, if you have a sustainable lifestyle, that means you try to stay fit and eat healthy food because you want it to endure. You want to get old in a healthy way. But at the same time, you're responsible for your kids, for your parents, for others also. So it's 2 different things, I would say. They are somehow interlinked, of course, but this responsibility is a part of being sustainable. If you're not responsible as a company, you're not sustainable. That's the way I would see it. Because then it hits you. It's why people don't buy your products, etc., and why you have problems. So how can CSR, that was a discussion we had with Mala and others recently, overcome the erosion of trust? There was an erosion of trust also. You saw that, the financial crisis we had that. You saw the Occupy movement. You saw the upheaval here in Israel. That's a picture here. When was it, 2012 or something like that? Where the trust in companies or so was going down, right? So can CSR help to overcome that? What is the role of CSR? And that is a question after all these investments that I was showing you before, companies had to ask themselves. So what is our role in society? And if companies are so great in CSR, why do these kind of things happen, right? That we've seen in various places in the world. Where I think we are going there right now, and I can talk at least on behalf of Intel, but what I also see, I'm on the board of CSR Europe, where it's the leading organizations in Europe in the CSR space, and a lot of companies are going that direction as well. This broken trust that you see there on the left-hand side, this broken trust can partially be rebuilt, I think, through CSR, yes, of course, by behaving correctly, etc., by doing these kind of things, but there's limits to that, for all the reasons that I said. So all these CSR programs can help, but in the end, if not done correctly, they hurt. And if they are done correctly, they can only go so far, because that's what's assumed of companies anyway. Again, as I said, the safety of workers in Kiryat Gat, does it help to rebuild trust? Not so much, because that's what people would expect of a company like Intel, right? Or other companies to make sure the workers are safe. What can make a big difference, and that's the second part then where I'm leading to, is social innovation. These social innovation, that's why I say, goes then beyond that CSR, where it's a business concept, but that can help to rebuild trust in the end, because you will see it is real projects, it's real solutions that are implemented in this world, not only just to throw a little bit money here or there, or to talk a little bit about, etc., or to invest in things that have nothing to do with the core business, like a lot of companies do, but really help to find innovative ideas, etc. So that's what I will talk a little bit about, how that can happen, or how we see it can happen. So when we talk about social innovation here, where we move from CSR, again, always keep in mind there is this responsibility of what your company does, keep in mind. In addition now, when we talk about social innovation, we understand it mainly in a sense of a new way of cross-sectorial collaborations between the three sectors. You might have heard about the three-sectorial model or so, NGOs, governments, businesses. It's exactly that. It's really like, that's one thing. And the other thing that you see in one of these definitions there, it's the concept of shared value. Or others call it differently, because if it's a concept of shared value, there's a great article from Porter Kramer, but some people criticize that. But anyway, shared value means value for all sides, right? Something like that. Let's put it that way. And different maybe to some understanding of CSR, where people start to, or where people still see it as sort of philanthropic kind of thing, it has very clearly one thing. It creates value for society, but it also creates value for the business. There's very transparent things there, because a lot of times when you remember CSR, people said, oh yeah, right, you're just doing that because you want to earn more money or whatever. And in the end you have to say, sure, I mean, these companies are there for profit, normal companies, and we don't do it, we don't invest in safety of the workers or these kind of things to earn more money, but well, in the end it's, of course, I mean, it was always suspicious when you talked about earning money, profits in the CSR kind of context somehow. You could explain it, etc. I think social innovation takes a little bit away from that, because social innovation in this new sectorial collaboration talks about really all these partners who are there, and sometimes it's only two. There needs to be a value for them. Otherwise, it's not a social innovation, but it's something else. And there's a lot of these things, as you can imagine or so, where you work together and you have a collaboration. But this shared value concept, first of all, is a very important thing in the social innovation context. I think that alone can take away a little bit about the issue of greenwashing, because we're not greenwashing. If we invest in something, I will show you some example later, we clearly said it's a sales program partially. We want to sell about that, but it has a social impact. I will come to that in a minute. So keep that in mind, shared value. First of all, this cross-sectorial collaboration, the way we understand it. Second, the shared value. And it's not easy. I mean, which wiring diagram? That's basically where we stand today in January 2014, right? That's how the situation looks like right now. So it's a mess. It starts with definitions. Everybody defines it differently. Everybody has a different concept, a different understanding behind. Everybody has different words and so on. So it is really a very challenging situation. Where does it start from? If we look at it, where would we start? We start with a vision. And a vision, I put you two or three things here together. One, you all know them, of course, if you've seen them before. Alexander Graham Bell, the telephone, one day people will be able to talk to each other without having to leave their home, was aspirational. Nobody believed him at that time. Henry Ford wanted to build a car that everybody who with a decent salary or income can afford a car. Illusionary at that time. Actually, does any of you know what was the biggest challenge for cities? There were actually conferences 100 years ago, I mean, a couple of years before, from major cities, because they wanted to tackle the biggest problem that urban areas, cities had at that time. Sorry?
Forced manure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, 10 years ago, 10 years later, the problem was gone, right? That changes. So when people say times are changing very fast these days, that's true. Technology helps to change very fast, but even then, I mean, these kind of horse shit or so, that went away in no time at all. Even then, 100 years ago. So, or John F. Kennedy, this decade, we will be able to send a man to the moon. And nobody believed him, et cetera, et cetera. So the vision, okay, we're not Henry Ford or John F. Kennedy or so, but we also have a vision for the last 3 years as a company, not corporate affairs, as a company. which is this decade we will create and extend computing technology. That's us. That's Intel, right? So which means we bring that to market to enrich the lives of every person on Earth. And of course, that's in the same way aspirational, which means there's no limit to that. We want to bring technology to the people, to the Earth, to everybody, to enrich the lives. And I'm not hiding that. If I say this vision is there for about, 3 years, something like that? I think 2 or 3 years, probably we have that. And it even took us a little bit of time to understand that. Yeah, it was there, and it was a corporate vision. And suddenly we started to realize how powerful that is, even for a corporate affairs team, for CSR or social innovation, to enrich the lives, right? That's something positive, to enrich the lives. And it's not filled with everything. We understood the technology part, but enriching the lives is something even more. So which means that vision there brings a sort of direction to what we do. It's not, I mean, it's of course to progress, to grow the company, etc. But at the same time, even at that high level there, it talks about enriching the lives of every person on Earth, enriching the lives of people. And when we talk about how do we implement these things now, social innovation, we come to that later in a company. This one is a starting point, actually. It's the first thing when we talk to. If I were corporate affairs and you are all engineers or non-corporate affairs, non-CSR people, this is probably the strongest argument I might have. Let's work on something, on the social innovation. What social? What's lives? Don't know. I need to work on the new technology. Yes, but so how does that enrich the lives of the people? It's a very strong argument for everything that we build our programs on, the CSR, especially the social innovation programs then. So this vision is really the way more and more we understand that the starting point. And I'm not sure how many other companies have visions. I'm not sure how many employees of these companies who have visions understand the vision, and how many of these visions are even talking about things like enriching the lives or giving a direction to the business purpose of the company. I think there's not so many, but I don't have a number on that. And it doesn't matter. We have that, and I think it's really, really powerful, so that will stay. That's basically why Intel exists, to bring technology to market, computing technology to market, to enrich the lives of the people. And then it matters the moment you start to say, okay, so how do we put that in place? And it's a matter of viewpoint. Where do you start? Now, social innovation, definitely from a society, and it's the same, by the way, right? Some people say, well, don't make a distinction. These things, of course, are the same if you read them. But it matters a little bit. Do you start with social? So what do you want to do good for society? That's good. That's definitely something we could use. It could be used in public and so on, and it could be the driving force behind a lot of initiatives that we have. And that's great. But what I realized personally as well is, if you change it a little bit in that direction here, that helps tremendously if you want to implement that in the company at a wider space. Because innovation, again, means the company goals. It's not so much CSR anymore. So you need more people. It's not the 50 people in the CSR department who are working on that, but you need to convince the rest of the business, basically, to work on that. And in the end, if you go to innovation, if you start with the innovation concept and say, in the end, it's innovation, guys, right? We talk about innovation. And you know companies as well. Does any of you know of a company who is not innovative, or at least who says they are not innovative? No. I think out of 100 companies, I would estimate 137 are innovative today, right? They are all innovative. Incredible innovation, what we have there, everywhere in the world. It's incredible. Everybody's innovative. So I don't understand what the problem is, because everybody's innovative, but anyway. But a lot of companies are innovative. And I think that's the angle, really, where you start to see, okay, how can we use that in order to transform the company more and more to behave in a way to add the social to the innovation part. And then that's the only chart on innovation I have, so I'm not going too deep into that. But when people then think of innovation, very often they think of what is mentioned here in red. They think of the new product, of a radical innovation, something totally new, a totally new concept, and closed innovation, which means we invent it here, we don't tell anybody, and then ta-da, there's a press conference and it's presented, and sometimes technology doesn't work. But anyway, it could be in any sense, right? But innovation goes far beyond that, if you think about that. Innovation is not only about a product. It could be about services, processes. Very often it's processes. How do you work together? How do you collaborate together? It doesn't have to be radical all the time. It can be reapplied. It doesn't mean that you tear down this building here and move it somewhere else to the Negev desert and do it totally different. No, you start with small hubs here of communication areas and try to change from the inside. It's small things, partially. You not change the whole thing, but you change partially the concept of what you have here. You put new things in place. You expand from that. It's all innovation, right? And then suddenly 10 years later, the college looks totally different than it was 10 years before, through these small innovations over the last 10 years. And it could be open innovation. And I mentioned collaboration. More and more, these innovations need to be open. You need to collaborate with others. You need to get input from others. I will show you 2 or 3 examples later. How do we do that? Closed means basically you have an R&D lab, research and development lab inside. You don't go outside. You develop it. It's top secret what you do there. And then suddenly there's a press conference, and here is the new mouse. Oops. Oh, okay. Here's the new cup. New material, etc. Open innovation, basically what we do, we have open innovation labs at Intel. We collaborate with universities, but the IP, intellectual property, is then free, etc. You cannot restrict it. We work together, we collaborate. It can be used then from whatever.
You can still have open innovation within the organization.
Oh, you can have open innovation everywhere.
As you said, with closed you had the R&D, but you may find innovation all over the organization.
Absolutely.
But you are not aware of it, or you're not having the right machinery to use it.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And even if I have a new idea, for example, I might discuss it with my team first, what we do in corporate affairs, a new idea in CSR, how we can do. But then open innovation for me means that I talk to some business leaders there and saying, what do you think about that?
Some people use the term external and internal open innovation, so you have 2 different kinds.
Yeah. But this open, and there's now lots of publications starting now, I saw it last year emerging, about open social innovation. So it's really a sort of research trend as well from academia, researching about what is open social innovation, right? That is based a little bit on how do companies, NGOs, etc. collaborate. So open social innovation is an interesting academic research topic there. But the point is here, there's so many more innovations that you can think of. Think of innovation, etc., in small, reapplied things. It doesn't have to be radical. It doesn't have to be the big thing that nobody thought of before. It's a new way of applying what we have today, putting it together with others, and suddenly there's a new kind of solution there, these kind of things. And that's why there is a lot of potential behind these innovation concepts. And then how to implement? Well, as I said, they are all innovative. All companies are innovative, right? Yeah, there should be an entrepreneurial culture. Okay, we have that. All companies have that as well, of course. And that is driving innovation in terms of process. And this innovation for companies is leading to economic success. Okay, so we are innovative, we create new products, and then we are profitable. Wonderful. Now, how does social innovation fit into that? Basically, you just put a layer with social on that. And I know this, I'm not claiming this is a sort of perfect scientific definition, Harvard, MIT, Stanford-like, no. But it helps to better understand that. Because what you do is, let's forget about entrepreneurship for the moment, but if you put a social innovation, a sort of dimension like what the vision for us says, you know, what is this social innovation? Suddenly what you create here, what is interesting, you create potentially ecological and social success into that, in addition to this economic success. And if some of you know or suddenly realize, what does this mean here? Ecological, social, and economic success. How is it? Do you know how that's called in today's reporting, in the annual reports? Sorry? Triple bottom line. Now, triple bottom line reporting concept is very well established today. Companies are not supposed to only report about their economic success. They are supposed to also report about the ecological and social success or societal impact. So this triple bottom line reporting, you can Google that, are so very, very common these days. All companies basically do that. And then, if again, coming from the business and saying, how do we implement it in the business? That's another argument to say, hey, okay, we don't only need economic reporting, but we also need that. So you can turn it the other way around even and say, if we don't need this, we also need this. So how do we get to this? By doing social innovation as well, because that's how you start to have, sorry?
Companies do report about the ecological and social impacts, but not as bottom line, as in the reporting of what are they doing, but they're not summing all the activities.
Partially they do. Partially they do. I think the standards will go into that direction. That it's difficult to quantify right now. I agree. But you report about things. It's like when you talk about brand or so. What is the value of your brand? It's difficult to do, but it's possible. It's very difficult to quantify the brand value, for example. It's difficult to quantify what is your ecological impact. If I compare rivers in Sweden to trees in Brazil, how do you compare them in a monetary way? That's difficult, I think. I agree. But in the end, this triple bottom line reporting in the end is a requirement more and more, where actually social innovation can help to support the company as such to drive this triple bottom line reporting there. So it is, in the end, it is really how to link the societal component in the end more to the real business, to the core of the business. And to give you one example also how that works, or for sometimes where we have ideas, that's a very recent example. There's, what you see there is this lady, she's holding a Galileo board. Galileo board, you might not have heard about it. Sorry? Like Arduino. Oh, wonderful, excellent, good, great. It's exactly that. It's a collaboration with Arduino. For those of you who don't know, and I didn't know before, so basically what it is, for the nutshell, it's a small motherboard, you know, chipset, a kind of board that size, a little bit smaller than that one, like Arduino had that. And we brought that to market in October. It was launched at the Maker Fair. It's a sort of do-it-yourself or developers fair. Our CEO was there. And what he announced at that time is that these boards that we start to produce now will be given in the first step to 1,000 universities. We will give 50,000 boards. Okay. Now that's an Intel product, right? That's an Intel product, and we give it to developers in universities, technology departments, professors, and so on. That in the end is business, right? It's a sponsoring, call it, or it's a giving away. What is new now, if you look at the middle, the universities, these 1,000 universities who applied, actually it was more than that, who wanted to have boards like this to develop new solutions, they had to go to a website and enter their ideas, enter their project description on one page, etc. What do they want to do with that? And you see it here, one of that. In the end, it was a basic Excel sheet or whatever kind of format. But what it means is we suddenly had about 1,000 ideas or more what that technology can do. And then we started, and we're actually still in the process to scan that. A lot of these ideas that are here have a social dimension. So people say we want to use that technology to develop projects or a solution that in the end is a social innovation. We couldn't have thought about that before. They couldn't have thought about it without the company. So in the end, there's more and more teams starting to work on that now with this technology to develop social innovation. Partially, it was an outcome of what they do. It's turned out to be social. But partially, if you look at the project descriptions, they said, let's see how we can use that technology now that allows us to develop something quick and easy for societal innovation, for an impact that we can have in our community. A couple of these descriptions are there. So interestingly enough, even though this whole university program with Galileo, these boards, wasn't planned to be a social innovation thing. It turned out now, as we are filling it with meaning, it turns out that it will drive a lot of social innovation projects where, you know, various partners work together there with NGOs, etc., that they bring in to work on something. So that will drive actually social innovation, right? And yeah. So that's what I said. I mean, on one side, increasing shared value. Okay, this is a. You see a small triangle here. It was supposed to be up here. Basically, that triangle was going from there to there and moving up like this. So the more, you know, there was a discussion also in CSR, and if you study CSR, you know that shared value. On CSR, on the left-hand side, what I said before, the CSR, there was a shared value. But seriously, I remember even we had discussions with the founders of that concept, shared value, with Porter and Kramer one day in the FSG discussions. Shared value in CSR was difficult and got a lot of critics. What is really a shared value here? We could argue it, but it never got beyond a certain level, to be very honest, and that's why it was criticized, because it just didn't fit together that much, right? And again, imagine just this going up triangle here. It didn't fit together that much because the responsibility of the company, what is a shared value? Well, sure, you could argue if nobody gets hurt in the factory, that's a value for the employees as well, but that's a stupid argument, right? So that's not really shared value or so. Being responsible is not so much of a shared value. Now with social innovation, you really come to projects, what are shared values? And it could be done through these university students there. It could be done that, as I said, the picture I showed before, that we as CSR managers in the end bring it to the rest of the organization, could be done, that we create shared value. That's the potential. For example, at Intel, we have an innovation process that has that is done twice a year for the EMEA, so Europe, Middle East, Africa. That's a region here, where about 10,000 employees of this region, they get a topic. We decide on a topic before, be it user experience of technology or whatever, relevant topics for the company in general. And then these teams go and develop in cross teams from marketing to sales to technology, some ideas what could be done with that. So that is a normal innovation process. We have it pretty standardized, pretty formalized. It gets significant funding. It gets reviewed every month by the vice presidents, etc. And what we are working on right now, for example, is to bring the topic of social innovation as one of these 6 months kind of topics into this one. It's not that easy because, you know, they were not waiting for us, right? I mean, the CSR department worldwide has about, what, 400 people or so. And then there's another 99,600 who are not part of that. So they also have ideas. When they talk about innovation, there's definitely there's competition, what people want to bring into the innovation process, what topics. And of course, most of them have to do with business, all of them except the social innovation. But we now have a good chance, maybe very soon, that we bring the topic of social innovation to the company. Why we haven't done it yet? Very simple. I think we're not there yet, very honestly, that the rest of the company fully understands what social innovation might mean or how do we see it. And we are still also in the process of defining that for us. But only when people understand what we are talking about social innovation, then they can start thinking about what could be solutions, for example. So I think before we bring the topic of social innovation to this official innovation process in the company, we need to talk about, we need to not educate the people, but work with everybody saying what it is. So get them excited, and then they are the ones bringing that up into the company. So it's really creating shared value. The shared value, you can read it. It's not now, I'm not going through. This is a chart from FSG. Business results and social results, products and markets, productivity value chain, increased revenue, market share, reduced cost, etc. for the business, reduced raw materials, reduced water usage, especially in areas like Kiryat Gat or so, where it's important, Arizona, New Mexico, because that's a challenge for Intel, right? I mean, we have a business that uses a lot of water, but also uses a lot of sand. Now, sand and water, usually you have either or, right? So which means we build it in the desert and then there's no water. So it's a challenge, water usage for Intel. But we make good progress in that, and you can read all of that. So there's social results, there's business results, of course. It's all researched already, and that's also a role where academia probably can help to see what is really the relation between social results and business results, etc. How do we do that? I'll give you one example here. Okay, that's a structure, empowering social entrepreneurs, transforming ideas into solutions, and building the ecosystem. And what it means, this is all theoretical. I'll give you one example that we have since 2006. We are now changing that a little bit, so it's not officially called that anymore, but it was over a couple of years a great program. The interesting thing is, when we started that in 2006, this Intel World Ahead program, we didn't call it social innovation, because at that time, probably nobody thought about the term social innovation. It was purely a sales program for us, very simple. It was purely a sales program. Some people said, it might be CSR, but we always said, no, it's not CSR. Yeah, it had some impact on society, you will see, but we never called it CSR, so let's look at it as a sales program. Where it was coming from was, does any of you know Nick Negroponte and his project from MIT, One Laptop Per Child? If you heard about that, you remember that? Some of you heard about that. What do you remember about that? What is it?
It costs less than $100 for a computer.
Okay, that's what the project said, yes.
And they wanted to give every child in Africa mostly.
Yeah.
Africa is the public relationship and it didn't work.
I wouldn't say that, but anyway, yeah, okay. No, but good point, yeah. So it was the so-called One Laptop Per Child, the so-called $100 computer that cost $299. But the title was, people remember the $100. Yeah. Absolutely, in terms of that, yes. And of course, it didn't use an Intel chip. So, of course, these kind of things, sometimes, we are honest, made us think about that some years back, right? And interesting. Another interesting thing that this computer had was a handle also in the back, generating its own energy. Small things like the ones you see.
Manuela.
Yeah, manual. Oh, that's cute. People like that, right? The problem is, we think, as a technology company, the role of a computer is not to generate energy, right? So that's others should do that. I mean, it's not a energy generator. So in the end, whatever, we started our own development with our partners and saying the idea as such is not bad, right? I mean, giving access to, let's say, Africa, rural Africa, in terms of education, and so the idea is right in general. But this one laptop per child, in our view, project, because of that, focused on the wrong things for us. It focused on a short-term solution or so, but we said, okay, the solution needs to be longer term. And of course, it was about selling, we had education sales as well. What we thought is, okay, you have access. Of course, we needed the product, so we developed a Classmate PC, which was a full-fledged computer, etc., with wireless LAN and everything. But then, as you can imagine, in a rural area, wireless LAN is not so predominantly available. And of course, the solution might have been this turn handle to generate energy. The question was right, because there was no, in a lot of villages, there's no energy, right? But we thought, okay, it's not the role of the computer, but what we need to build long term, if we really want to have an impact here, is this ecosystem that you see. We need the access. Okay, we need the products, granted. And we work with manufacturers there locally. But we also need connectivity. Now, that's not for Intel to do connectivity. It's the Vodafones, Telefonicas, and telecoms of this world who need connectivity. So we started to work with them, how to bring connectivity to these markets. And of course, energy, we need energy. So we need to work with energy providers, all these Aeons, Vattenfalls, and whatever they are called, or so, energy providers. And then we need education, which means we need programs. Okay, we had that because we have good education programs in CSR, as I showed you. How to educate the people, how to use that technology. You need content. Where's the content coming from? For this, you need the publishers to be part of that. What is the content that these kids are working on, etc. So all of these kind of things we tried to put together then and made a program out of that. Initially, as I said, not because of CSR, as a sales program. And if you look at that now, I mean, again, this program officially, it's now moving to other areas, it's moving on, etc. But this program as such is a perfect social innovation. Even at that time, we didn't call it that way. Yes, we had an interest. We benefited from it. And it wasn't billions and billions, of course, but yeah, it was a sales program that in the end we used to increase the market. But at the same time, of course, there's a tremendous social benefit in all of these areas, as you can see, not only in terms of education, but also, if you look at the PCs, for example, that you see here, Intel is not producing them. We're not a PC producer or a notebook producer or whatever. We don't do that. All these products are produced from partners, OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, that work with a sort of Intel design. But they do it locally. And very often what they do is they create a fab, they create a PC production locally. We have countries where they just started, just out of nothing, they built a factory there, they employed 500 people and started the PC production. And now they're still into this PC production. From with that, officially that country there, small countries, is now an official country that produces PCs or computers. Not only this one anymore, but they learned from that and they did other things, which means they really got into the business. And some of these factories employ more than 500 people now. So it has a social impact as well through that program. But again, for us, it was a sales program, it benefited, and it also had a societal component. So in retrospect, it was a great social innovation, as I see it. That's how people see it now, but at that time, we didn't call it that way. There's more examples. You can read Poland, Africa, with all of that, so how companies, technology works together, etc. We don't have to go through that in detail, I think. So in the end, the point here is that I wanted to finish with is that then we can have a discussion on that, how you see that. And again, I'm also learn CSR is important. CSR will stay. And for me, there is no, when you sometimes hear that CSR 2.0, 3.0, I even heard CSR 4.0. And I really wonder what that is. I mean, if you're responsible for your mother, are you responsible 2.0 or 3.0? Right? I mean, you're laughing at that question, but it's the same question when you say, are you at Intel or at any other company? Are you at the CSR 2.0 or 3.0 level? Honestly, I don't understand that question. I don't know. We are responsible. And I think that's where we have to get it back, that discussion there. There is a responsibility in all of these areas that you choose, right? Education, people, environment, where you are responsible as a company for. And that will stay. Doesn't get you the mileage in terms of communication and so on, but you need to do that. It's very important. Work on that, stay there. And in addition, the social innovation now, I think, opens tremendous opportunities, but also challenges, of course, for the business to really get engaged at a much wider level. And in the end, also to overcome this trust issue, right? Because here you might say, okay, it goes to that level. If you really work on innovative projects, you have an impact. You can say, this is the impact we had on society. We had a true impact that is proven because of the innovation we were driving. And yes, we benefit from that. We make a profit out of that, but society as well, basically. And that's why what we see is the CSR, that will stay. We will work on that. No change to that. But in addition, we now focus really on these, what are these social innovation projects? How can we drive innovation across the company? And that's a much bigger challenge. As I said, until here, in this area, apart from some environment, we talked about 300 people. Here, we talk about 100,000 at Intel. And that's more, a little bit more. And that is now the challenge where also, for example, CSR managers, with all job descriptions you might have had, I would say it's all true, it all stays true, but one thing will be added. The CSR managers or public affairs managers, government, whatever you call them, more and more they will become change agents to really change the company now, that the whole company in the end becomes more and more responsible through the products or services that they do. Not only the CSR department doing nice things and the rest of the business does whatever they want, but that the whole company really starts to engage in that, so through these social innovations. That's, I think, is what we see more and more, the change. It will take some years before more and more companies are there, that's true, and we are also working on that. There's a lot of things we're working on, we haven't succeeded yet, but more and more this falls on fruitful ground. You have the vision and everything that I was talking about. What you also need, you need the business on scalability. To give you one example, I was in China actually last year at the Social Innovation Week. And there was a lady at a worldwide level presenting, a young lady from India, and she was presenting her idea, what she did there in this space, that she developed a scooter in India for people who have no arms. So people handicapped, no arms, can drive a scooter. I mean, this is great, perfect. And she described a little bit, and in the end, after the presentation, I talked to her and I said, so how will you bring it forward then? And she said, what do you mean? Well, how do you make sure you have a larger production of these things, etc.? So, and she said, well, you didn't get my message, Thomas, right? We are there to solve a problem, not to make money. I don't want to be a Bill Gates. And I said, well, it's not about you becoming a Bill Gates in terms of money. It is about the fact that right now you produce how many? Well, maybe 6 a year with my father in the garage. I said, good, 6. Are there more than 6 handicapped people in India? Yes. So the question then is not to become rich with these kind of things. I think the question is, how do you put scalability into these innovations together with business, maybe, that more and more people can benefit from that? Because I don't know how many handicapped people are in India or around the world, but definitely more than 6. So there might be an even bigger societal impact or social impact, a positive impact, if this scooter is made available to others, for example. Right? And if you then work with companies who can provide the technology, the scale, the worldwide reach maybe, would be great. In this case, maybe not Intel, maybe or the Vespas and Piaggios or whatever they are called to do scooters, right? I mean, something like that. Why don't they introduce it? Why don't they collaborate there in terms of business? And they should make money, and a great idea. But then a lot of people can benefit from that, not only the 6 scooters that she does with her father every year, which is a great idea, but it can go beyond. The societal positive impact can be much bigger than just these 6 scooters. So I think that's a good example here how scalability is also one of the points why businesses and social NGOs or so should somehow work together, because very often these social inventors, social entrepreneurs, very small scale. Of course, they are small, they invent something, they have a great idea, but they cannot scale it. And then large companies, of course, can scale it, can help to scale it, can help to provide sources or so to make sure that idea gets beyond a garage in India, as good as it is. And again, it's not so much about making money. Sure, Piaggio or Vespa in this case, or whoever is it, Yamaha, Honda or so, yeah, they will make sure ultimately they might make money out of that. But then again, I think what the more and more young people see in a pragmatic way is that's not a problem. If they do it, fine. But if there's a scooter where people handicapped can drive it, that's a good thing. So why shouldn't they make money out of that if a societal problem is solved at the same time, if it's in balance? And I think that's what we see more and more where it's going, where it's really not only the CSR, which is an add-on to the business, it will be through the social innovation, this thinking, this conceptual thinking, this idea of giving your innovations a direction will be more and more embedded into the companies right now. And I'm pretty sure in 10 years we will see more and more companies who really work in these areas there than what we see today. So with that, I think CSR, social innovation, let me finish on that, and I'm open to discussion. There's the first one, yes? Thank you.
I think about this Indian innovative woman that presented. I can understand her fear because you can think of a potential future where the handicapped people will be abused, because I can think that now she is selecting those she give, the scooters, she work on the financial aspects, and then it can, in a way, become a very financial, cold business. So the problem of the CSR, responsibility in our family is, our engagement in the family is one thing, and the whole issue was that in the business, in the limited way responsibility was defined in business terms, the social parts that were in the family or the community were not, or in the community were not there. So I think that the challenge in the CSR area is how to make this engagement, and I definitely see the line that you put, that you draw to the social entrepreneurship or the social innovation, which is an area where people are engaged. I see here in the school, for example, that as CSR, important as it is, at the end of the day, it's a little bit boring because it's not the core of the business. So it's important, it has values, but you see people that they say it's very important, but they are not engaged. In the bottom-up level, I'm saying, doing in the everyday life. But innovation, entrepreneurship, this is something that is at the core of Intel, yes? Yeah. So what I see here, I doubt if the word social is needed. That's actually my point, because it's maybe entrepreneurship or innovation for social outcomes, because when people are engaged, when people are doing innovation, they are in it, they see how it has to do with their core business or core everyday life. They have to work in a community or in teams. You can enrich their environment. And I think when you say social innovation, some of your employees, your worker, you would say, why social? I can do it in my community, the social parts. Right. So I think there is, in a paradox, there is more potential to do it directly as an innovation, entrepreneurial project. And the win-win has leverage in this way.
I agree with the 2 points that you made. First of all, I also understand the fear of that Indian lady. I have to start with that, yes, because I think today a lot of companies are not at the point where they would take it in a meaningful way, but they would just put the logo on whatever you want, so there might be a fear. But ultimately, that's the way it goes. And what you said, this innovation, you're absolutely right. And again, we can discuss these words. I know maybe some people call it societal innovation or sustainable innovation, or as our manager called it one day, Shelley, she said, well, Thomas, the Americans don't like the word social. I say, no. And if you look at that, it's interesting, actually. If you look at Intel, I say, but we call it a CSR, right? Yes. But all the websites, and I didn't realize until recently, they talk about CSR, and when it's spelled out, it talks about corporate responsibility. Check that. I mean, I haven't checked. It's true, obviously. Officially, we talk about CSR as an abbreviation, and corporate responsibility then. It's true because
now we have also environment, and we have so we don't want to insult the environment, so we don't say social.
Right.
But naturally, it's.
And then I was proposing, okay, when we talk about enriching the lives of every person on Earth, I said, Shelley, okay, if we don't call it social innovation, should we call it? It's an enriching the lives of every person on Earth innovation? Maybe, okay, it's too long, but anyway. Sorry?
Or maybe communistic.
Communistic, yeah, well, some people might understand that, I agree.
But the word that is missing is the connectivity.
Yeah.
You said connecting and enriching. And the connecting is the...
Connecting and, yeah, I think that both are right, you're absolutely right. In the end, why I've used social innovation, I mean, I was also for some years, I was in that, I followed the discussion about CSR, corporate, whatever. In the end, CSR is now the term used for that, whatever you want. What I see, I might be wrong, today, the most commonly used term for this concept in general is social innovation. Again, the Americans might not like one word, okay, it might not be perfect, but it's what most people understand, so I don't want to be right now like any professor trying to introduce a new concept and a new thinking or what. People call it social innovation today. If you look at all the major companies, they call it social innovation. And that's why. But that discussion can happen. I agree it might not be the best one, but that's today, I would say, the way most companies call it. I would personally say societal innovation might be a better term, but nobody talks about societal innovation unless you have heard about that. But you have heard about social innovation right now. And I think that's the label for that. For me, it's more what to do with that, how to implement it, right? It's more the whole concept. How do we get that CSR thinking, as you said before? How do we get this sort of CSR spirit and thinking into the whole company? That's what social innovation in the end stands for me right now. But yeah. Oh, sorry.
I think that the real impact of CSI will happen and will take place when managers will be actually measured and compensated. You mentioned the triple bottom lines. Yeah, yeah. I think it's a vision, yeah, but I'm not sure yet they are compensated and measured by the rate or the price of the stock. So at the moment that managers will be measured and compensated by the social or impact of their company, of their business, then this will take place.
And the second point, I fully agree to the measurement, and I think we have that in Intel. And compensation, right? Very often it's not clear. Very often right now we're at the point where probably it's somewhere buried in that. And if you talk about the overall water usage, that's difficult. It's easy to measure maybe, but who feels responsible among 100,000 people for the water usage of the company? That's difficult that you start to see an impact. So the measurements have to go down to very individual levels where you can really have an impact. And that's a challenge, of course, in lots of companies. And what is my environmental impact at Intel? What can I do to, sure, I can save paper, I cannot print, these kind of things. I can switch the lights off and these kind of things, but it is very difficult for people like me or so maybe to really reduce it. The second thing is also, it's the measurement, but it's also the regulations. In terms of top-down regulations, you can say if you're in the purchasing department and procurement, very often you can say we're buying new chairs for this building here, right? And then there's two ways. The traditional ways that the procurement manager is comparing some kind of offers from various companies and very often deciding for the cheapest one or whatever kind of criteria. If the college management had very clear criteria, it has to be 100% biological, whatever good material, that procurement manager doesn't have a choice. Then he's comparing at a certain level, which means you can force, in a lot of senses, this kind of behavior, right? By setting these goals. It has to be that kind of level, and then the decision is at a different level. But of course, if the goal for the procurement manager is to reduce cost as much as he can, he will never get to some kind of sustainable material in things. So it's both. It goes back to the bottom line. So from this perspective, yes, measurement and these kind of regulations, you can also have some kind of impact in this area. Yeah. Was there a question here?
Yes, I would like to ask about the copyrights. When you talked about Arduino and Galileo, and you told the students, "Come give us some new ideas," and they wrote it down, and you said it's like a database for new ideas, and this is not your ideas, it's their ideas, and you're taking it and using it for your business. So
no, we're talking about that in general, right? I mean, it's public. They are using Intel technology to do something good, for example, and that's good. We're not claiming copyright of that. For example, as Intel, we wouldn't be doing that. I mean, there's no intellectual property on that. They are developing great solutions, and they do that with Intel technology, right?
So you just given them the platform and the idea stays theirs.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's the same like if you would take technology today, you would take, I don't know, a couple of servers and notebooks and develop a solution here in Israel that, I don't know, has a positive impact in the Negev desert, or for fishermen finding more fish easily so they can double the quota of fish they get out of there because of technology, etc. That's good. That's social innovation where, for example, Intel Design can help to find a solution that we don't put in place, but it will be an NGO, it will be the Fishers Association of Israel or something like that who find that idea right, but there's a positive impact. I think it's not so much about IP. I think this, or intellectual property or copyright or whatever you call it, it's really how do we collaborate together to find a solution. We don't claim copyright on any of that. I mean, if I look around, you all have computers or so, and I know 90% of you use an Intel chip by average. So 90% of you here will have Intel products in somewhere standing around. There's no copyright. If you do a social innovation with your computer or technology, that's okay. That's good because, you know, we can work together. But then it's more like, can we scale it? Maybe, for example, is there a way that we can collaborate? How can we can scale that solution that you might have? But then it's individual things, individual discussions or so, but it's not so much about negotiations or so today. It's really like, yeah. Oh, I don't know who was first there. Okay.
I'm curious about the borders you were working in. For example, you talked about the computers in Africa for kids. Of course, it's a beautiful idea, and of course, everybody is. I think it's amazing if it works, but when you go to people inside Intel and you have to convince them that it is important, and you have to show them how the company will benefit from it, and suddenly you're in charge and you're responsible for communication. I don't know, ideas in Africa, and it's not Intel, it's not computers. And of course, you talked about the long term, and but I'm curious how, well, you're a company, you have limited resources. You can make computers and you can sell them, but all the other, I don't know, activities that you showed, who is responsible for them? Intel people, the CR people that work with you, or people from other companies that you involve in the activities? You understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, I mean...
Education in Africa and communication in Africa, it's big things.
Well, I don't know, let me try to answer, and you tell me if I'm right. On one side, yes, it's absolutely challenging, and I think we're just at the beginning right now. So I really wanted to share with you a little bit where we are today. I don't have the answers, and maybe if I come back in 2 or 3 years, I might say some of that what I said today was wrong. Might be the case. But this is where we are. This is where I think a lot of companies are going through the work that I do, etc. So from that perspective, yes, it's very challenging to engage others there. The past, if you talked about this Africa World Ahead, for example, there, of course, the idea was that we need to create, and it's coming from the sales team, that we need to create that system in order to be able to sell. It's basically laying the ground out there so that we can even sell. It's not so much that you can go there and say, okay, I have a computer here, who wants to buy it, right, kind of things, because then you reach your limits very fast. And you say, okay, we need to invest there, we need to make sure that there's a sort of, you know, the groundwork is laid so that computers can have an impact there, which means that's why they are bought. You only buy products normally if you can use them for something. And if there's no electricity, if there's no broadband, you don't need a computer right now, these days, right? It's useless. So we also need to invest in that kind of things with partners. And then we make sure what other partners are doing to make sure that there's this environment. And of course, all the partners also benefit from that to a certain degree. So it's shared responsibility.
If you show them a business plan, it's easy to convince.
In this world ahead, yeah. In the end, it's a business plan, absolutely. And a business plan doesn't mean we make profit immediately, right? It can also be we invest for some time, absolutely. And I think that's will be more and more. These social innovations from the company perspective, what I see, sure, there's a nice thing. Everybody wants to do good. I mean, most people, I would say, but I would say everybody. Everybody wants to do good things. But in the end, the company is responsible, so we need some plan, even a social innovation. What is the impact? And it might be, to a certain degree, reputation. A reputation can have a quantifiable value, as I said, in terms of brand, but that's very difficult to measure, and especially in these areas, it's even more difficult to measure. So when we talk about reputation in these kind of senses, rather at a broad sense, right? Yeah, okay, we get reputation. But it's more really what is the impact, and yes, you will have ultimately more and more business plans, even in social innovation. And I think that's what is still a challenge. When you would or we would mention the word social innovation together with the word business plan, a couple of people would still say, "Oh, that doesn't go together." I say, absolutely, it goes together. If you don't have a business plan, it's not a social innovation, then it's philanthropy or a nice dream that you can have, and you can do it on the weekends or so, but it's not a business. And if you want to scale that and really make sure that there's a real impact, in the end, you need a sort of sustainable business plan behind. Always, even social entrepreneurs need business plans. Otherwise, it's just a hobby that you do on the weekends. Yeah.
Conflicts between different dimensions of CSR. I think you gave us an example of some kind of an innovation which helps you to fish out of the sea with a very smart IT system or something like that. Well, for the societal dimension, it's a very good thing. You can get more fish for the poor people, etc., etc. Yet for the fish, it's not the best thing, is it? I mean, you have a large ecological impact instead of a societal one. Now, if you have innovations, ideas, it's always good, but some of them does not actually good for all the dimensions which you just described. So do you have any kind of a...
How do we solve these problems?
An approach, maybe?
Can you ask the question in 2 years again? Good question, I don't know. I think right now, as I said, I mean, we're just at the beginning to implement something what we call social, societal, whatever we want, these kind of things, into the innovation processes. It's not very clear today how it really works in detail. I think there's a willingness. So, but how do we measure if there's a conflicting ideas or so? I don't know how it will be solved. Ultimately, it might be the business side wins, the social side wins. I don't know. I think it's negotiation. It's nothing specific, but I don't have a blueprint for that right now. I think it's talking about what fits to the business. Of course, the more we see as well, the more it's aligned with the business, the easier it is to be put in place. That's clear. If it aligns with the business priorities we have today, okay, then it's easier to be implemented because more people understand that. But it could be also radical ideas. We have certainly a certain amount of freedom or so sometimes to implement things, but that was more on the left-hand side, the CSR space, not so much on social innovation because we haven't tested it yet. We're just beginning there. So far, we are 95% CSR on these programs that I was showing you, right? That's what we're working on. The social innovation is new, what we're driving there. We're trying to see that. And if I talked about the 1,000 universities there, these projects where you said IP, for the moment, how I personally would use that? Internally. Internally, because I think there's ideas in this database that we could use internally. They are shared publicly. Actually, they gave these ideas publicly. I could talk to our engineers in these innovation processes and saying, look at it, this Excel sheet here. There's 200 ideas what people had, what Intel technology can do to have a social innovation. And maybe then get the engineers thinking about, oh yeah, that's a great idea. And then they start thinking about that in the innovation process. That's roughly what I'm thinking right now. It's not done yet, right? So that's the direction I'm working on. Because you have to give them some ideas. Right now they think of business. And if you think business can also have a societal impact, there's an Excel sheet there in the middle from that chart, maybe you can use that for. So they start to think in that direction.
Hire the students.
Sorry?
Maybe you can hire the students.
Well, of course, I mean, we had the discussion earlier today. Yeah, we hire the students because innovation comes from all parts of the people, of all parts of the organizations. A lot of times experienced IT managers or researchers, right? I mean, social innovation, I have no doubt, will more and more come from generation Y, Z, or whatever you call them, the young people. Social innovation, that's what young people are more and more grown up with. We know that if you work today, if I hire an 18 or 20-year-old, one of the questions, what can I do in addition to my job to help society, be it volunteering or other things? And I think then social innovation offers great things. But it will be more the young people who work on this social innovation rather than older people, absolutely. And then you link it, of course, in order to generate ideas, what you said, you link it to all the social media, right? I mean, social media is a perfect tool to generate ideas. If you do crowdsourcing of social innovation ideas through social media, perfect idea. We're not the first one to have it, but it still works. There's lots of ideas that can come up there. What can be done with technology to help to solve a social problem? I think you are one of the three, and then, I don't know, yeah.
I was wondering what you answer to people who say that corporates, as they are making business today, are part of the problem and not part of the solution. And by not helping small businesses to grow, they are making the problems that afterwards they're trying to be innovative to solve. And that's the first question. And the second one is, people also say that CSR is the black sheep of the family, that corporates are using it not only to greenwash, but also to show themselves that we are okay, we are part of the community, while most of the time they're not really part of the community.
Let's see. So your first question was about how do we help small. It had two components, right?
People are saying that
the small entrepreneurs.
In the past 20, 30 years, the way that corporates are making business very aggressively is the problem, is one of the basic problems of the economy.
My question was related, or is related to this first part, because every year or every time in Israel, for example, when Intel intends to invest a lot of money, billions of dollars, the question arises, well, why to give so much taxes help to such a big company who really does not need it, instead of giving it to hundreds of small companies that will develop the country, etc., etc. And that is based, I think, about I would just add something. There is some blurring when you use the term social and societal. Social, well, it's enlarging the business with all kind of partners, and societal is about the whole society. And but the basic dilemma is what I think you meant.
That's part of it, yeah.
Okay. So on that one, I mean, I cannot comment on the tax thing in Israel, sorry, because I don't have the details there. What I would say is think about Intel. I mean, we just celebrate our 40th anniversary in Israel there, and we had the worldwide anniversary 40 years, when was it, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, something like that. We were a startup. I mean, even though we don't look like one, 40 years ago, we were a startup company, right? And we are investing a lot in these startup companies to make sure how do they benefit from the ecosystem that we have. We invest a lot in entrepreneurship. We have entrepreneurship programs, not only for awards, but really to foster, to do coaching, etc., mentoring, because we want exactly the same there. We want the young companies, the startups, for example, to grow. And of course, there's an interest that they are part of that ecosystem, but very often, and we're not the only one fostering that, but I think all these companies, you talk about the big multinationals today, think about, apart from maybe the Siemens or so, I mean, it's all these Googles in the IT, right? They weren't there 20 years ago. They were all startups, and they made it somehow even to be these kind of big multinationals that you call today, all these Googles and Apples and Intels and so on. So they are pretty startup, which means we foster that, we support that, we have an interest from everywhere, from investing in these companies up to supporting them, integrating them, whatever it takes. And I think from that perspective, that's how we try to support this kind of, smaller, small, medium kind of companies or so in a large way. Now I forgot your second question.
Yeah, black sheep of the family.
The CSR being the black sheep of the family?
Yeah.
Oh, I think there we have to differentiate. It's definitely not true for Intel. It's definitely not true, I think, for a lot of companies there. Very often it's the white sheep, because in the end, we are sometimes considered we do the good things, right? We invest in people, we invest in students, we invest in the environment, in people, etc. The black sheep, I think, is only by some companies, and it's getting less and less today. And I just read that one recently. I cannot say who that was, but there was a company applying to as a member to one of these organizations where I'm. And it's coming from the larger financial industry kind of sector, right? I mean, okay, financials is one area, but they are particularly under some kind of, let's say, public attention for some kind of money laundering. You all would know that company, big financial thing. So normally you would say respected company, right, in normal times, but now there's some accusation of money laundering in their operations. And if I looked at their CSR website, for example, they had a couple of programs. They talked about kids, they talked about dogs, they talked about environment, they talked about, 8, 9, 10 things. And if you really read through the last sentence, and is funding that with a certain amount of money. They had a project and is funding that with a certain amount of money. So suddenly all that somehow broke together, which means their CSR page was basically, in the end only, we give money. We choose you, and you all get $1 million and we're done. And these are the ones, if they are somehow caught, or if somebody looks at that, then you say, oh, that is CSR? But I would say that is not CSR. Can I avoid that? No. It will always be there. But I think CSR is not really the black sheep. CSR is the good sheep right now, that we as CSR managers need to bring that thinking into the larger organization. That's the way I see it. So.
I would like to maybe rephrase this question.
Okay.
What is the real motivation of Intel or like Intel to go into CSR activity, really?
What is the real motivation?
Yes.
Well,
Didn't you read the vision?
no, I think it is absolutely that we have to.
I did, but the vision is too vague.
What is your real motivation not to, I don't know, be mean or so, or react positively to your parents and kids? Because you're human beings. And in the end, you know, we might be multinationals, all these multinationals, but in the end it's made out of people, which means we need to make sure that we treat our people correctly. And ultimately, of course, there is some kind of business case for that. I never said the word philanthropy today. There is a business case. The fact that we treat our employees correctly, first of all, definitely it's a human thing. But at the second, I mean, that's how I want to be treated. But at the same time, of course, I mean, if we would even, just saying a hypothetical thing, not treat our employees correctly, well, that would go around the world within, today I would estimate 3.7 seconds and a couple of server breakdowns, right? With all this server. And that you can imagine what happens then, first of all, not only to the stock price, but I mean to the public pressure we would get, not only from governments, but also from young college graduates who would not apply anymore for Intel. Nobody wants that. So of course, I mean, it is an intrinsic belief on one side, absolutely, that's the way we have to behave. But at the same time, of course, there's no company, seriously, I would doubt that has success over the next decade that is not investing in that doesn't show that they are responsible for. You have to do that. If you're small or if you're large, you have to do that somehow. I mean, it starts with small bakeries. If you live in a village with 500 or 1,000 people or so, and there's a bakery shop, that bakery shop will be asked to maybe supply free bread or croissants or baguette or whatever to the tournament of the 12 to 14-year-old kids who play football on a Saturday. They will be asked, and most companies will do that. Most bakery shops will do that, right? So what is their motivation? Reputation. They just feel it's the right thing. These, you know, to do very often. That's what we had one day, right? Our CSR report is just the right thing to do for us, but also for society, for everybody. If we would say, no, we don't do that, if we would stop all that, we will be out in 10 years. We can do the best chips in the world, we're out of business. So definitely from that perspective, at a larger sense, you have to do it. But you will be also the black sheep of the university, of the family, etc., if you start to behave not responsible anymore as a person. People would start to hate you. In that case, people would not invite you anymore, maybe to parties or so. People would, you know, not you personally, but don't get me wrong. It's the same for people, right? Why are you doing that? Because you want a good reputation. You want to be seen as a man who is responsible, takes care, who acts in a nice way. In the end, companies are the same.
Boy of the family.
I wouldn't say so. I think it's just that what is new is the term. Even 100 years ago, there was philanthropy. There was all these Fender bills or so. They gave it. You called it differently. They were helping. You know, all these big dynasties or so, I know from Germany, Corp or so, that are there for 200 or 100 years. They always did these kind of things. They invented that. Improving the situation for the workers in the factory. A lot of companies did that in the Industrial Revolution. Some of them were bad, others were good. And they invested in working conditions 100 years ago of the workers. So I think it's not so much new that companies want to do something good or so, but in the end, first of all, I think these are two things. Intrinsic is one, but also in the end, to make sure the company still exists in some years. You have to behave, you have to be part of the society. We are part of the society. That's why it's called corporate citizen, right? That we are a corporate citizen in the end. And that's these two things. So when we say business, in the overall sense, absolutely, there's a notion of business, but not in a small sense. That's why I say it's not to sell. I can tell you here for 4 hours what great things we do. None of you would go out this afternoon or this evening and buy a computer and says, I don't care which one, it has to have an Intel chip because they do so great in CSR. Nobody will do that, I know, of course. Maybe tomorrow. No, but I think these are the two motivations behind. Yes?
How are you going to implement the social innovation in Israel?
How do we implement the social innovation in Israel? Or in general?
Here in Israel.
Here in Israel. Revital? How do we implement social innovation in Israel?
First, I want to answer your question, your first question about giving the grant to Intel. So it is important to us to say that we are in a global world. We are competing to get more foreign funding and grant to Israel.
Well, we all of us know that explanation, but I think we all know that if we don't give the grant, then Intel will go to Ireland. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we are all in this. But our CSR strategy, and now go to your question, is one of the things that we are promising to the government as a return to this, in addition to the jobs, to the innovation that we bring to the country. We also give our social responsibility programs. And Dov Furman, who was the establishment of Intel in Israel, 10 years ago, when the CSR was not even a term, we didn't know what it's all about, he was putting the term best effort. He was saying to the government, when we got the first grant to the fab in Kiryat Gat, he will say, we will give back our best effort. And no one knows what is your best effort. And thinking of it in a past view, and I was when we got this grant, now I understand that it wasn't called CSR. We call it the Best Effort Program of Dov Furman, and we give back to Kiryat Gat, and we were focused on employment, development of suppliers, and education. These are the three elements that was defined with the community as the thing that they need. So now we call it stakeholder engagement. But now there it was so natural that this is the CSR, is everything that, because we appreciate the grant from the government, because we understand this is good for our future, and this is how we implement those programs. And it's across the board. It's in all departments. Everyone is involved in HR, in environment engineers, in the fab, in the recycling. And we have also a kind of ROI for this. Because when the environment people recycle water, it's a lot of money to the company to give back because of the recycle and what we are doing. So it's a business case, but it's also a commitment for us as from Intel Corporation, as Israel here, to give back to the country and for the community.
May I comment on this? Dov Furman, in fact, all of us know that, got the, the opportunity to found Intel in Israel because of his own contribution to Intel in the States. That's first of one. And that about social responsibility, that's quite interesting. I don't know of many of those stories like that, which is a big story, and it's true even. It's a good story and it's true. The second remark, what you said, it reminded me of Fairchild. Not a lot of us know that Fairchild was the father of all those little companies, startups like Intel. And it was, how many years ago, you say?
40
years
67,
ago.
so yeah. 44.
So I take back my own remark or question.
Okay.
Just a question about what you've mentioned before, that maybe, could you see that this something such as consumers making the decision on whether to purchase product X or Y will be based on what the company does socially? Can you see this happening? And do companies maybe have a hidden interest that it will not happen, and they're trying to hinder that?
To start with the last point, I don't see that companies have an interest in hindering that. I don't see that actually. But to the first point, I think there's still a huge gap between what consumers say and what they really do. And when is that changing? That's very difficult to predict actually. I mean, we know that there's when you have 100 kids in the classroom and they all have smartphones, and you ask the question, who chooses a smartphone by social standards, you know the answer, right? Nobody does that.
Their social standards are who's having the same.
Oh, social, yeah, okay, yeah. They choose it on other things, right? So but I think there's a lot of lip service, so to speak, right now from consumers. They would like it. What I see in some areas, maybe, in the food business, it's getting a little bit better when you see, okay, it's sort of, biological, organic food, whatever you want. But ultimately, for a lot of topics, if you would buy a new car, I think one of the last things you would be interested is some of these, what we call CSR issues or so. I think where it can work, actually, I think what some companies did wrong, not wrong, but try to experiment. If there's a price premium, there will never be a price premium, I think, for any kind of good product, so to speak. It has to be the same, and then you can differentiate. And we know there's a couple of examples, maybe in the retail business. If there's two retail chains, for example, in the drugstore business, one is behaving very good, socially interested, responsible. The other one, normal or even below normal, and they both sell the same kind of shampoo or shower gel or whatever. That is proved a little bit that drives consumers more to that good kind of retailer because they like to buy there, right? But they would not go there if the shower gel or the shampoo suddenly is 30% more expensive. I think that we have seen that doesn't work. So if that Nivea gel is at the same price, they go to the retailer who behaves better in public, probably.
It's a matter of perception rather than facts.
No, there were cases where Nike was, boycotted because they used child labor. So there were many cases where consumers said, no, we do not like this behavior. It's irresponsible. It's not human, and we will not buy this brand. So that happened already.
Yes, but if Nike will go out with a
yes.
campaign, with a public relation campaign, then people will start
That's
to
different.
Perceive Nike as a social company.
This is why people don't buy.
In the face,
It's exactly that. That's to that point. I think I don't want to say not skeptical. I think it can work, but I think it's really it will still be a long way before, and I don't know if it will even happen with CSR. If you have children and you're a good father, it's the same, right? Yeah, that's what I expect of you because I know you. I personally don't know you, but if I would know you, I would say you're a good person. Yeah, sure, you behave good as a father. But my image of you would go down if I start seeing that you don't behave good to your son or your daughter, something like that. But other than that, that's what is expected. So this kind of behavior, this responsible behavior, more and more is expected, I think. That's why I think even this retail chain thing that I mentioned, it's more that people don't necessarily go here because this is a good company, but they don't go here because they are not at that perception level. You're right, it's perception, but a lot of times something is behind perception to a certain degree. You can only do so much about... Sorry?
Sometimes there are facts.
Sometimes there are facts. And I would say more and more that we all know these things, how things can go wrong if something is discovered that you don't behave according to what you say, right? As I said, I was not joking about the 3.7 seconds kind of shitstorm on the on the web or so in the social media that can happen immediately today, everywhere. We know that, right? I mean, you discover something where Intel says this and something was wrong. People would tweet it or so, it would go around the world immediately. I mean, the damage will be there in no mean at all. You cannot even return from lunch before the shitstorm is over, basically, right? So that's why, in the end, it has to do with transparency. You have to really be behind what you say. That's why this greenwashing, to a certain degree, is not a real greenwashing anymore. It's basically just, giving, or not going far enough, but really doing things wrong, not doing what you say, I think is highly risky. I would be surprised if serious companies today would be caught in doing some of that in the normal kind of business. Normally, the risk is just too high. People look at that, they look at what companies do. So I think, and then of course it's perception, it's what you do with that, how you communicate that. You shouldn't over-communicate, but that's another story. That's a story of communication, of CSR, which is a totally different subject. But yeah, it's perception.
Is Intel funding social projects or only in-house creating projects?
I wouldn't call it funding. I would engage. We are usually, what we don't do is just provide money or so for something and then support it. That's not our style. What we do is we believe much more in what we call, in the American way, connecting the dots. Right? I mean, what are the opportunities here? How do we make sure we align what is there? How can we help, etc.? And yeah, of course, that involves sometimes financial resources, other resources, that's true. So yes, there is money there, but a lot of projects that we have are not even talking about money. It's like, you know, for example, we created a curriculum recently, a sort of 40-page curriculum, how to foster entrepreneurship education, so that we can bring to schools or to organizations, sometimes even labor organizations who want to give it to unemployed people, to maybe think of entrepreneurship as a career option, right? So how was that developed? The money involved in all of that was zero. And how it came? Well, it started also at a university. We had a workshop there, and one of these normal lectures or workshops. And then suddenly, professor, and in this case it was me, we said that we can do more. So we had another workshop 3 weeks later. And we said, why don't you guys here develop a curriculum? So which means for you it's a sort of a semesterly work. You also work in CSR, or in this case it was business, but you work with the pedagogic team from another department. And you create an entrepreneurship curriculum. And they did that. And it was, you know, it went into the note, into the final examination kind of note and so on. We had that, it was there, the school created it, the students were proud, had a great achievement. We could use it, it was joint, everybody can use it, it's free, I can give it to you tomorrow if you want, there's no IP. But for the students it was a learning, they liked it, they developed something that can be implemented. For us it's great. Cost zero. Maybe a free lunch for the students one day, but that's all. And that's why I say it's not always about, you know, buying. And other companies would have said, yeah, you want to develop that with your company, here's $50,000 or $200,000, whatever. Develop that, please, and send it to me in 1 year. No, we are thinking more of these kind of things. How can we work together with others? Where can we benefit? How can we use some of that? How can we use various business competitions we have, take the knowledge here, put it somewhere else? This is more how we drive that. So very much outside. And a couple of times, yeah, some financial support might be needed. Okay, that's true. We know that this world turns on money a lot of times for a lot of things that you need to pay. But that's really not in the foreground.
So it's a lot about this, mainly spreading the knowledge, in this case.
Yeah, it's spreading knowledge, it's connecting, linking, partner. We work, I think, more extensively, I would say, than similar companies. We do work with partners. We rely a lot on partners and see how we can link these kind of things. We have concepts like cypreneurship, as I said. Cypreneurship, you saw that on one slide, is science or STEM and entrepreneurship. We brought that together because we said we have entrepreneurship competition, great ideas from great teams, but sometimes the idea behind was a little bit, well, okay. And then you have these kids going to ISEF, to the science fair, science competition with incredible ideas, but they have no idea how to put that in place, right? So we were thinking if we bring that together in a cypreneurship framework through contests, through workshops, through hackathon kind of events and whatever is there, that could work. And a hackathon event, I mean a 24-hour thing like where kids develop, you know, entrepreneurship and science. The cost for that again, what is it? It's a hotel room for 30 or 40 kids and free pizza and cola. No, seriously, I mean, that's it. Just free supply of food and drinks, right? Soft drinks. And you have the results. That's why, and kids love that, right? Because they say, you have the great idea, great science idea, but you know how to put it in place. So why don't you two get together and you develop a business plan? Because then she might tell you, a lot of your ideas might be scientifically great, but have zero value for how to implement. And vice versa, right? I mean, these things belong together. And that's why we are trying to get active in, also with the partners like Junior Achievement that are also in Israel, with other partners in the science area. How can we bring that together? That's where we see our role mainly. And again, if it's funding apart from pizza and cola, yeah, okay. Might be sometimes the case as well, but again, that's not the key to that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hub Media.